Out here, peace used to stretch as far as the eye could see, acres of open land, the kind of silence you could almost hear. My days started with the smell of hay and the low hum of cicadas, and ended with the soft creak of the old gate when I came home. It was my slice of quiet, nothing fancy, just honest, simple living. Until the morning that letter appeared. A crisp white envelope with the HOA's logo pressed in the corner, sitting right there against my gatepost like it owned the place. I didn't think much of it at first. But that envelope, it was the first crack in the calm I'd built for years. The thing about peace is, you never notice when it starts to slip away. I lived just beyond the HOA boundary. Their neatly trimmed world stopped right before my dusty road began. And that's how I liked it. They had their identical mailboxes, their manicured lawns, their approved shades of beige. Me? I had dirt under my nails and a gate that squeaked when the wind blew. But that letter brought their world to mine. At first I thought it was some mix-up, maybe a stray notice meant for someone else. But soon, more followed. Folded paper threats disguised as courtesy reminders. They sat on my table next to my coffee mug, their tone getting colder every time I opened one. And then there she was, Karen Whitmore, the HOA president. You could see her before you even heard her, standing at the edge of my property line like she was inspecting something she already owned. Clipboard in hand, fake smile tight as a fence wire. Cars from her subdivision had started cutting through my land, turning my quiet ranch road into their shortcut. It saved them a couple of minutes. But to me, it meant trespassing. I posted private property signs, polite as I could, but she'd stand there pretending not to see them, watching, measuring, like a hawk that had already decided what it was going to take. Before all that, life here had been slow and good. I fixed fences in the morning, helped neighbors haul hay or pull out of muddy ditches, and sat on the porch at night listening to the wind. The kind of life you can only understand if you've worked for it. My ranch was mine, built with my hands, my sweat. Every creak in that gate was familiar. Every nail, every board had a story. That's why when they called my gate a violation, something inside me burned. It wasn't about a piece of metal. It was about someone trying to rewrite what peace meant on my land. When I called to straighten things out, I expected reason. Instead, I got bureaucracy dressed in politeness. Karen's voice was calm, too calm, the kind that hides knives behind words. She told me I wasn't technically exempt from HOA review because the road served multiple properties. I reminded her I built that road, paid for the gravel, leveled it myself. She paused, then said, "We'll review your compliance status at our next meeting." You could hear the smugness even over the phone. I imagined that meeting. Rows of people nodding along while Karen read from her clipboard, pretending fairness while planning the next move. That was the moment I knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a takeover. The next few weeks were quiet. Too quiet. Then the signs appeared. My gate, left half open one night. Tire marks gouged into my gravel road. Empty envelopes with no return address tucked under my fence post. Every little thing told me I was being watched. When I'd walk to the barn after sunset, I could almost feel eyes on me from the road. Still, I told myself not to overthink it. But when I found that new notice pinned to my gate, accusing me of obstructing access to a shared road, I knew they were pushing for something bigger. The wind rattled the metal gate that night, and it sounded less like creaking and more like a warning. I decided it was time to face it head on. One morning, I saw her car idling by the road and walked right up. I told her calmly this was private property. She smiled, that tight corporate smile that doesn't reach the eyes, and said she was just ensuring compliance. The conversation started civil and ended with her threatening to bring it to the board. I stood there, dust on my boots, sun beating down, realizing I wasn't talking to a neighbor. I was talking to an empire of paperwork with a human face. When I walked away, her SUV door slammed, and I knew she wasn't done. After that, the letters multiplied. Fines for weeds, fines for the color of my gate, even one for improperly parked vehicle, my own truck in my own driveway. They arrived every week, each stamped with red ink like a warning shot. I stopped counting after the 10th one. I could have ignored them. but the thought of someone claiming power over my land made my blood boil. Each notice was like a small war declaration. My desk became a pile of paper and anger, and I realized this wasn't harassment anymore. It was a campaign. So I fought back the only way I knew how, quietly. I set up cameras by the gate, small ones that blended into the posts. I wasn't planning revenge. I just wanted the truth. Something solid I could hold up when they twisted it against me. As the sun went down that night, I tightened the last screw, looked over my land, and made myself a promise. If they came for my peace again, I'd be ready. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. For days, nothing happened. Just still nights and flickering camera feeds. I started to think maybe they'd given up. But then, one night around midnight, I saw movement on the screen. Headlights without beams, creeping along my road. My pulse picked up. I muted the TV, leaned closer, and waited. A cold knot formed in my chest. I didn't know what I was about to see, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. The calm before the storm had finally ended. When I looked closer at the footage, there it was. Karen's silver SUV. Headlights dimmed, creeping down my road like a thief in the night. My jaw clenched. She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The camera caught her stopping near the fence, stepping out, clipboard in hand, taking pictures of my gate like she was building a case. The next morning, I printed every still frame and laid them on my table beside her last warning notice. I remember the feeling, not anger exactly, but a deep, heavy certainty. They'd crossed the line, and I wasn't going to let it slide this time. I spent the next few days organizing everything, every letter, every date, every grainy image that proved she'd trespassed. I created a folder thick enough to slam down on any desk with weight. The more I looked at the pattern, the clearer it became. This wasn't just harassment. It was targeted, deliberate, maybe even coordinated. I wasn't the first. Neighbors had whispered about it before, people too scared to speak up because they thought the HOA could ruin their peace. So I made calls, asked questions, and slowly the puzzle came together. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was everyone's. It started with 3 neighbors showing up at my gate one evening. They'd seen the notices piling up and wanted to know if I was okay. Turns out they'd been hit too. One fined for unapproved mailbox paint, another threatened for building a small shed without permission. Ordinary folks just trying to live their lives. We talked until the sun went down, sharing stories, realizing how deep this went. Karen had built an image of authority so strong that people forgot she was just a neighbor with a clipboard. But that night, under the fading light, something shifted. Fear started turning into resolve. When the next HOA meeting came, I was ready. I walked into that bright, echoing hall with a binder full of evidence and a camera recording every second. Karen sat at the head of the table, pretending not to see me. Her smile flickered when she noticed the manila folder in my hands. I waited for her to finish her speech about community standards before I stood up. Before we continue, I said, I'd like to discuss your unauthorized visit to my property last week. The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. I held up the photos one after another, her SUV, her trespassing, her camera flash in the dark. And that's when her mask cracked. Just for a moment. But long enough. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some people looked shocked. Others relieved. You could tell who'd been waiting for someone to finally say it. Karen tried to regain control. Said I was misrepresenting the situation, said I'd doctored the images. But the timestamps were there, clear as daylight. A few board members looked down at their hands. One man in the back stood up and said, I've had enough of this. That's all it took. Within minutes, the meeting spiraled, questions flying, her control slipping. The walls she'd built with fear started to crumble, one truth at a time. The next day, I met with a lawyer. A friend had recommended him. A quiet, sharp man who'd seen too many HOAs like this. He looked through my evidence, nodding slowly. You've got a strong case, he said. Trespassing, harassment, defamation, they overstepped. For the first time in months, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone. We filed a formal complaint, not just against Karen, but against the entire HOA board for misuse of authority. The papers went out the next morning. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But this time, they'd have to answer to more than a homeowner. They'd have to answer to the law. When the court date came, the room felt heavier than air. Karen sat across from me, that same clipboard in front of her like a shield. But this wasn't her meeting. This was neutral ground. I told the story, calmly, fact by fact, showing every photo, every timestamp, every letter. The judge leaned forward more with each page. When Karen tried to interrupt, the judge cut her off sharply. It was the first time I'd seen her lose that polished confidence completely. My lawyer rested his case with a single sentence. All my client ever wanted was peace. And somehow that hit harder than any accusation could. The ruling came quicker than anyone expected. The HOA was ordered to cease all harassment, reimburse the unlawful fines, and publicly apologize. Karen was removed as president, effective immediately. She didn't look at me when it was over. Just packed her papers and left, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a broken sword. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could feel the air around me lighten. Justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's just the sound of silence returning after too much noise. Weeks later, I repainted the gate. Same color, same wood, but this time, every stroke felt different. Neighbors came by, offering coffee, lending hands, sharing laughter that had been missing for too long. The HOA replaced its leadership with actual volunteers who cared more about people than power. The shortcut through my road was closed for good. The land felt like mine again. When the new board president stopped by to shake my hand, he said, "We want to rebuild trust." I just nodded. Because trust isn't rebuilt with words, it's rebuilt with quiet, steady peace. Now, when the sun dips low over the fields and the sky turns that deep amber, I sit on my porch and think about everything that happened. About how one letter turned peace into war, and how standing up for what's right can sometimes be the loneliest road. But it's worth it. Because in the end, it's not about winning against an HOA or a person like Karen. It's about defending the small piece of world that feels like home. I learned that peace isn't something you get handed. It's something you protect, even when the whole world tells you not to.